Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D. I, of course, am your host, Jessica, and this week we're talking about mystery, psychic predictions, community, and tea with James Kerr. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Jessica. It's wonderful to be here where D&D is not.
Thank you very much. Yes, great to have you on. And thank you to everyone that's come along to watch live. Thanks for joining us. We are live, so you can ask any questions in the chat. And if you're listening to the podcast, thank you very much for listening. And anything we're talking about will be linked in the show notes so you can click through easily. So, James, obviously, we're going to be talking about the Psychic Danger Society, which is what we're here to talk about. So I've got my cup of tea ready. But first, I would love to talk about you and your background and history of games, if I may. So the classic opening question is, do you remember the first tabletop game that you played?
I do. It was in a dingy basement apartment in the mid-90s.
Lovely.
Where the walls would have been white if not for the cigarette stains. And it was a bunch of, I think, half inebriated young men pulling a book off a shelf and saying, "What's this?" And then the person who was our host said, "That's Dungeons and Dragons. We have to do it." And so I sat down and had my first experience. I'm not quite sure what happened.
No.
And but it was lovely, and I was given an opportunity again years later for someone else to gateway me into the hobby again. And then it didn't take long, and I decided I think I can do this too, and tried myself. So it was very, very. I don't know. I think that's a typical experience for a person of my age, certainly for a man my age, is just a bunch of people sitting around saying, "Hey, let's do this. We found this cool book on the shelf," and jumping in feet first.
Fabulous. And when I look at your games now, it's fair to say they're quite far from Dungeons and Dragons in terms of gameplay and style. Like, I wouldn't think that's a big reference. So where did you go from starting to play Dungeons and Dragons? Did you start exploring other more kind of indie games or different types of games, or what was your path to that?
Well, I was never. I had a good local convention that had a lot of different games. So I didn't even play Dungeons and Dragons that much before I went to a convention and jumped into anything. And so I just played absolutely everything that was out there. And I played it because I hadn't played it before. I guess I had something of an atypical perspective on games, which is a lot like movies. Like, I watch my favorite movies a bunch of times, but I don't only watch those movies.
Sure.
I want to experience new movies. And it very quickly occurred to me how different games can be. So I was never entrenched into one particular system. And I was fortunate to have a very welcoming community of people want me to be involved and to jump in with them. So my experiences were varied pretty quickly.
Fantastic. I think games conventions are excellent like that. Like you say, you can so easily just pick up and try something in, because it's like, well, it's like what, 3-4 hours of my time. If I don't like it, well, that doesn't really matter. So
and it's a wonderful chance to explore, because I wouldn't necessarily have access to learning those systems or to running them myself. I'm something of a forever GM, so I need to go and find them myself. But going to a convention, oh, your game is about kittens who shoot lasers. Let's do this. Oh, your game is about undead Vikings. Okay, all right, let's do undead Vikings. Oh, your game is about, and on and on and on. And as the years have gone on, I've become fascinated with exploring how many ways you can crack that nut. Like, how many, there's so much territory left, so much fecund ground that's completely untouched in game design. And I would like to explore that ground, either as a player or as a GM or as a designer myself.
Yeah, I mean, you've segued really nicely into my next question, which was, and how did you go from somebody that was involved in the hobby, like running a lot of games, being a forever GM, and going to conventions and playing games? What made you want to take that step into creating your own games and publishing them?
Well, there's two answers. One is that I had a big career. I had two careers. One was in radio, and one was in publishing. So I was in trade magazine publishing. So publishing was something that was very achievable. But we all take in a lot of media. We watch television, we read books. I have never at any point taken in a lot of media without putting a lot of media out. I was the teenager who wrote terrible love poetry. I was the student who wrote failed novels. I was and so of course, as games became more and more important to me, I was publishing my own games, even if it was just circulating among friends, like my own terrible ripoffs of this or that, or hacks of childhood properties or whatever. And that led me into freelancing for Pendelhaven Press, which is a publishing company out of Montreal. They do the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok role-playing game, which uses runes instead of dice, because I was very interested in alternative mechanics, and my first degree was in history. So and I had experience in publishing, so it was natural. And then after doing 5 or 6 books for them, I decided there's no reason why I shouldn't be doing my own weird things. So started doing my own weird things, and I've been doing them ever since. And I don't know if anyone can stop me at this point.
They haven't been able to yet.
No, they've tried.
Yeah, they've tried, but failed. But so today we are talking about the Psychic Danger Society. But if anyone is interested in listening and reading more about James's other games, if you go to the website radiojamesgames.com, you can see all of the games. But today we are going to talk about the Psychic Danger Society. So James, could you give us a little intro if people haven't seen or heard of this before?
Absolutely. Now, I have to, this comes with a preface. I think that especially people are coming to radiojamesgames.com because I think I give people a bit of conceptual whiplash. The first big game I put out was about martial arts. It was like an American martial arts movie. It was low to the ground and gritty and combat in the streets and heartbreak and caring and comfort. And then I followed that up with a cowboy game. A vanilla cowboy game where you bet bullets in order to resolve conflict. And then I had a giant monster game in between, and I had a science game, and now I've come to a cozy little murder mystery game with psychics. So I've probably alienated my audience several times over, but so every project is fresh, and every project is fresh mechanically and fresh conceptually, and every project, I don't know how people make art without it being very personal, and every one of these works means something to me. And the Psychic Danger Society very much comes from growing up in a small rural Ontario town, as I did, and also from my mother's influence, although she has no idea what role-playing games are and wouldn't know them from Adam. But still, and it's because, and I tried to put as much of this in the premise without seeming sappy, but it is kind of sappy, because I grew up in a town that was run by powerful ladies. Everything that happened in my small town had to go through the IODE or the CWL or the Friends of the Library or the Hospital Auxiliary Board, and they were all powerful ladies who made things happen in the town, and nothing happened without them, their ability to, as they say, get things done. I have no idea if how universal this experience is, but the people that I've shared it with have told me, oh yeah, I guess my small town was also run by these powerful ladies who meet for network breakfast at the local restaurant and discuss their gossip and elevate businesses in the town. And I was thinking one winter day, 2 parallel thoughts, and one was nobody brings that whole subsection of small town rural society into games. We don't get a chance to explore that. We explore worlds where we get to strike dragons with axes, but we don't explore the people in our community. And the other thing is, I was thinking, well, what would it be like if you rolled all the dice before a session and then used them throughout the session? Who would do that? And because I really like a sexy marriage between mechanics and setting, obviously psychics would. That's like a psychic prediction. So these things came together very quickly, and the first draft came out pretty instantly, and it hasn't changed much from that initial draft. It's been expanded, and it's been through sensitivity reading and proofing and editing and the feedback of others, but fundamentally it's been the same, which is you roll your dice, and those are your predictions of a seance as you get together one evening, because you are powerful ladies in your community and you're determined to keep your community safe. And then as the danger presents itself from that comes into your brain just briefly, and you spend the night trying to figure out what exactly is that danger, what exactly is going on, how can we stop it? And you go out in your community. And there's a few wonderful things that happen as a result of that setup. One is that the longer you play, the more you understand the people in your community, because they keep coming up in different ways, in different cases. The Johnson's dog Petunia was going to bite a burglar, but next week he's going to be hit by a car and we have to stop him. But the Johnsons already know you from the dog Petunia. So the community builds the longer you play, which is a lovely feeling. I think it's a lovely feeling because it strikes at the kind of for good and for ill feeling of walking down your hometown and someone saying, "Hello, James," and you have no idea who they are, but they tell you they used to change your diapers and from when you were little, because that happens so regularly in small town. Oh, I knew your father. Oh, I knew your mother. Oh, I know your cousin very well. Okay. Yes. So I wanted to strike at that in a role-playing kind of set, something cozy, something lovely, but also an appropriate sense of mystery. Because my mother's other influence growing up was she watched an awful lot of murder mysteries. And so bringing that sense of mystery into the game in a way that's not going to be arduous for the game master, because it is very difficult for game masters to come up with murder mysteries as effective as Agatha Christie.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. You have to use this corkscrew method of working backwards and discovering a mystery, and then one player asks the wrong question, and suddenly the whole thing's cockeyed. So how do you do that in a way? Well, in a way, the game, the Psychic Danger Society, presents the mystery and presents some clues, and then it's up to the players to unravel it. But as a game master, I don't have to know that. It's all written in the book. Quite succinctly. So I'm popping around all the place, but the point is that the influences are murder mysteries, my mother, small towns, psychics, dice mechanics that lend themselves to psychics, and bringing it all together into community and saving your town. And I guess the kind of meta narrative, because I'm not very fond of, I don't want to overrule the way players come up with their surroundings and the way players influence the story. I don't want to have a story that limits that at all. And so the only greater meta narrative within the text is well, maybe your society of little old ladies has been protecting this town a little too long. And maybe it has a kind of karmic debt, because even little Jimmy can't fall off his skateboard and have a concussion anymore. And so if you fail cases, as you fail cases, because you'll eventually fail a case, well, then you get a supernatural something that is going on. It's very mundane. It's like 80%, 90% mundane, but you get that little spice of something otherworldly. So little Jimmy does fall off his bicycle and get a concussion. Oh no. And suddenly the person who's running for mayor is a vampire. So keeping things cozy, but fun. How do you do fun murder? Like many of those murder mysteries or light murder mysteries that I grew up with on television managed to make murder kind of fun.
Yeah.
Oh no, so-and-so is having an affair and they're going to murder their jilted lover, but you only know because of the receipt that was in their coat pocket. So that's the vibe I wanted to hit on with the
That's
Psychic
wonderful.
Danger.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you mentioned about small towns as well there, because I don't have much of a sense of that, because I grew up on military bases and moving around a lot. So the idea of having a long-standing community where you kind of know everyone does really interest me. And I know other people that have that. So I love the idea of that as an inspiration for a game. And it's wonderful for storytelling and creating the world as a table together, because I guess there's an element of collaboration with the players making stuff up as much as the GM. Am I right?
Well, absolutely. But without some games put a great creative onus on their players to come up with things, which can be wonderful with the right group of players.
Yes.
Then the whole thing sings. But on the third day of a convention, when everyone is a little bit hungover and dehydrated and don't have a thought to think, that's not very kind. So the Psychic Danger Society, the way, and I don't know if I can take credit for this, but the way the mechanics have worked out is it's very easy to just focus on who you are. Oh, I'm just a 40-something-year-old librarian who loves the quotes of my books, and I have very large glasses, and that's my character. And maybe I have a telekinesis that is wobbly and gives me a headache afterwards. And then you can focus on that. And then the first question is, so and so, like, if the case is that that there's going to be a little boy who steals a candy bar from the convenience store. And then you have to find out who's the little boy. And then you find out that it's Tommy, little Tommy from down the street. And then the first question from players is, how do I know Tommy? And then it becomes, well, yes, of course, you used to babysit Tommy. Then I know where he lives. Okay, let's go track down where he lives. And so it can unravel with a very small sequence of questions, as opposed to the player having to come up with some creative leap. Not the creative leaps are discouraged. It's just it can be difficult when a game hinges on energy. So instead of this game hinging on energy, it has enough prompts and assistance and can happen in a natural progression, so that even though it's the third day of a convention, and I say this because I just got back from a convention running.
Yeah, I've seen the inspiration there.
I was running it all weekend, so it's very much presently in mind. It can still happen. It can still happen in a cozy way. It's not a game with like narrative peaks. We're not going to have a climactic villain come out and be defeated in the end. It's not a game with fighting. You're not little old ladies running around hitting people with your handbags, although that does come up from time to time.
Sometimes,
as it needs to, which is really interesting because you need to live in this community. If you decide that the best way to prevent the scandal that's going to happen on 32 Almer Street is to burn the house down, you still need to live in this town where the house is burned down. And I love getting players whose only exposure to role-playing games is Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know how they end up in my game sessions. I don't know what entices them to look at the Psychic Danger Society and say, gee, I think I'd like to give that a try. But they have a number of revelations. They're like, wait a second, I can't just punch people and walk away. I can't just burn down the house. And so they start thinking differently about what it is they can do and what it is they want to do as part of living in their community. And that's gorgeous. I think it's wonderful. I think it's lovely. I love blowing people's minds just that little bit, right?
Does sound great. You briefly kind of have mentioned, and we talked about one of the inspirations being, like you say, powerful women in small towns and things. So the characters that we're playing, can we talk a little bit about kind of character creation, what goes into that, and if we sit down to play, who will be?
Absolutely. Well, I present 12 characters in the book, just in case you want to get rolling pretty quickly. And there's not a lot to characters. You have a name and you have a background and you have a bit of color to you, and you're given a few objects, two things that are ordinary but useful, and one thing that kind of flirts with something fantastic. So the one little old lady, she's 74 years old and she's very quiet and nicely mannered, but has fantastic stories if you believe them, but nobody knows if they're true. And she has on her knitting needles and yarn, but the yarn is impossibly long and maybe tremendously strong. Just a little bit that somebody could maybe use creatively in the game. And then once you have a character picked out like that, you have two more things to decide on. One of them is, what is your unique power? What is your unique psychic power? And none of them are particularly fantastic. And they're all a little strange or have some manner of drawback, and they're all kind of cute. Very Douglas Adams, I guess, is the idea. So one of them might be, you can pour a glass of water, and when you pour a glass of water, someone else falls down. And then how can that be? How can you use that creatively? People love that one. I don't know why. And then the other thing that you have is you have some kind of want or need. And that want or need you can manipulate to try and get more dice when it comes to an augury, when you do another seance for your predictions. Or it can be detract from the dice that you get as well. And those wants or needs might be for tea, or it might be for antiques, or it might be for reality TV docu-series of true crime, or it might be for all kinds of things that people are interested in. And that's, or the love and affection of small animals. So you between the character, the things they have, their wants or needs, and their power. That's enough, because I've tried.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you really want to talk like inside baseball here, but I'm very conscious
Sure.
of making sure that there's enough meat on the bones that you feel there's something substantial going on, but there's not so much that you feel weighed down by it.
Yeah.
And so I want people to feel like they have a very good sense of who they are. Okay,
Mhm.
I know who I am. I'm a mild-mannered librarian with a slight little candle's worth of pyrokinesis and an incredible addiction to coffee.
Mhm.
And then go.
Great. So
And then
so
you
it's enough
go
to
out
do
and
it.
get yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of game where mundane things mean a lot in terms of the flow of the game. So, I may be a 35-year-old soccer mom, but my minivan seats 7. And that's a big
Mhm.
deal because
Mhm.
you can cart everybody around. You just have to get all the soccer balls out of the back first. And I might be a 60-year-old arts and crafts entrepreneur, but I have 100 stuffed teddy bears, and I can use those to my advantage somehow. And on it goes. I don't know how much
Okay.
your exposure is to like regional craft fairs and uh, arts and crafts festivals, but my mother was a
Mhm.
seamstress growing up, and so I spent a
Oh,
good
wow.
chunk of my childhood like sitting under those tables, being very bored, uh,
Yeah.
as people came and went, buying teddy bears and smocks and whatever else. And so, uh, again, I can't help but make something that means something to me. So
Mhm.
when I'm running the Psychic Danger Society, I have the joy of people creating a community in front of me,
Mhm.
and the joy of living out kind of, I don't even know if they're antiquated ideas about small towns anymore. I hope they still exist. I hope everything is
Mhm.
still like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a journey.
Absolutely. So it sounds like character creation is something really quick that you could do at a one shot at a convention and have people make their characters right then and there. It's not going to take a very long time. Is the game designed in mind for one shot play, or is it flexible to do campaigns as well? Or what was your vision with it?
It's very satisfying for a one shot,
Hmm.
but I'm not somebody who particularly believes in mechanical character progression, or at
Okay.
least for all games.
Hmm.
Like in when I did Fight to Survive, role playing martial arts meets heart. That's a big part of it. But for this game, it's the breadth of experience that you have with the character that matters
Hmm.
most. So the more time that you spend with it, the richer those stories become. So while it's a satisfying one shot, I mean, if you give it 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 sessions or something, the world only gets richer because
Yeah.
you know that this teenager, Christy Beckley, that you found in a tent on in Ferris's Park and rescued her from a storm where she was going to get washed out in a flash flood and fall down the rocks. You know that she's now babysitting the kid down the street, and the kid is going to fall off the roof of the house because he's fooling around. And you know that she's dating Bradley, who's the star rugby player who's going to get into a car accident. And, so these characters become very alive
Hmm.
in a way that happens in all role-playing games, more or less. But the problem
Hmm.
is if conceptually you're traveling from place to place and always meeting new people, it's harder to weave
Mm.
these NPCs in a meaningful way. Because even if we take the example of Dungeons and Dragons, I know this is not
Sure.
D&D, but what stories do people tell about Dungeons and Dragons to people who didn't play? It's always about McGrubbin's Grubby the Goblin, who they love very much and followed them around for 5 sessions. It's always
Mhm.
about that beloved character that isn't theirs.
Mhm.
People fall in love with their settings, and they fall in love with the people populating those settings. So the Psychic Danger Society, very satisfying for one shots, but if you let it settle in over a longer period of time, it becomes something accidentally meaningful,
Mhm.
and you feel like these characters are living with you.
Yeah. So it really brings out that community element. Fantastic. Um, we've talked a lot about kind of the setting and the world that we're in. Let's dig into the system a little bit more. So you briefly gave an intro into the prediction dice. So we're going to roll our dice at the beginning. But could you go into a little bit more detail of so what the core mechanics look like?
Absolutely. The worst thing about the Psychic Danger Society is that you have to
Oh.
come up with 5d12. and not everyone has 5d12.
Okay, sure.
Especially at a convention. So I just come with a little bucket of d12s, and then
Sure. Yeah.
not the majority of the games that I've published have been diceless. In fact, almost all of them. So this is my foray into dice games.
Okay.
During psychic prediction, during the initial prediction, each of you roll 5d12, and that gives you a spread, and that is what you're stuck with for the case, or until you resolve the case and do another augury some other time, which you might do once or twice or 3 times during a session of play. But generally speaking, you roll the dice and you're stuck with them. So you have a 1 and you're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with that 1. And you have a 12 and you're like, I'm going to really enjoy that 12. And you have a 10 and a 7 and a 4 and whatever. And then when conflict arises, you spend those dice trying to get over the number of what it likely is, what the threat is. Okay. So if you know that you need to, and for any manner of conflict that comes up, oh no, the horrible thing is going to happen 10 minutes from now. That means we have to get across town very quickly before the piano that is on the 2nd story falls on the pedestrian that's going to go underneath it. So how are you going to get there in time? Oh no, we're going to get there. Well, we're going to put forward a dice. I put forward a 7 because I think that's going to be enough. And there's a little chart that people can reference to see what the scale of that is, the scale of trouble. That's how it's characterized. And if you get over the number that the GM has for the problem, well, then it was successful. And if you get under it, it was not successful. And if you get on the number, this is where things get tricky. That spawns another case. There is some other case that happens somewhere else in town. And then those cases, as they can, interconnect. And complicate each other. And then suddenly you have members of the society running all around town trying to solve all these things. So maybe it might be 1, or it might be 2, or there might be 3 as it goes on. But that's, generally speaking, how the mechanics work until you run out of dice. Because once you've run out of dice, you've run out of predictions. You can no longer resolve conflict. You're vulnerable to whatever comes your way. Now you can run across that town, but you're going to be winded and tired and have to sit on a park bench for a little while. Or you can, you may be subject to danger. Maybe the piano is going to fall on you when you push somebody out from underneath that piano. It's not the kind of game where PCs tend to die. That being said, people can be pretty reckless at convention games, and it has happened before. But in terms of conflict, this great thing happens where everyone around the table starts working together, and they recognize, oh, I've got an 8, but I don't want to spend this 8. Does anybody have something lower? Because I think this is going to be easier. Okay, you be the one to phone the fire department then, because that should be a simple matter, so it should require a small dice. So people start pooling their resources in a meta way that mirrors how they would work together as characters. That is very interesting. So people work together in a big way, because if you are the one spending the dice, then you are the one who has to be doing it. Which sometimes goes against their character, or doesn't. Oh, I don't want to be the one to drive the van across town. I don't know. I've got these big thick reading glasses. I don't know if I should be driving the van. And people gossip and they quibble and they chitter, and then it's as a result of that. And it's lovely. So mechanically, you roll 5d12 and you spend them out in working with other people around you to try and resolve the conflict. You also, if you'll allow me this sidebar, you also can make initial predictions.
Okay.
So when a case arises, when they have the augury, I say, who wants to put forward a dice for the first case of the evening? And if you put forward a low number, it means that it's going to be something pretty simple. Little Jimmy falling off his bicycle. Not a big deal, not a big threat. And if you roll very high, it might be something very serious. Like there's a big storm and there's going to be a flood and someone's going to get trapped in their basement and may need rescued because they went back in to rescue their cat, not wanting the cat to be drowned. And so people can choose how dangerous they want things to be.
Okay, nice.
And then the person who puts forward that dice, I tell them some kind of vagaries about what's happening, because there'll be a brief little paragraph in the book saying, I don't want to give one away. It's actually in the book, but I think I've already done it. Is that there's a terrible rainstorm, and Darwish Betancourt will drown trying to go back in to rescue his black cat Midnight. So that's what will be in the book. And then as GM, I'll say, well, you have a flash and a vision of darkness and a meowing in the darkness and dripping and everything's wet. And that's all I'll give them. And then people can spend their dice to get predictions. When is this happening? To whom is this happening? How is this dangerous? What are going to be the barriers in the way? And then they have to sit there scheming about how they're going to spend their dice to learn little details, or should they go out and find out? Because it will be easier and the dice will be cheaper if they're in a situation to find these things out, as opposed to spending them out with their psychic powers. But what it does is it keeps the game moving. No matter what. So whether that happens immediately or whether that happens once people get stuck, it means that nobody's ever stuck. It is never the case. And that was one of my big concerns with this being a mystery game.
Yes.
It's never the case that people just stand around looking at each other saying, what do we do next? Because they always have dice and they always can spend them to know more facts. And it's just facilitated by the setting of psychics. And so they people scheme around the table and they think, oh, darkness, a cat. Is there a lost cat? What's going on? And then they realize it's raining outside. And they're like, okay, so there's probably a flood. So when is this going to happen? Or what's going to happen 2 hours from now? Okay, so who is this going to happen to? Darwish Betancourt. Oh no. All right, there wasn't a guy in our prediction. Do we know a Darwish Betancourt? Oh yes, he's a shut-in who comes to your library and he always takes out books on military history. Like, okay, all right. He always takes out books on military history, comes to my library. Okay, so tell me more about the cat. And then it just keeps, and then they eventually, all right, we need to go into Jolene's van and we need to drive to Darwish Betancourt's house and we're going to see if he's home. Okay, so they drive to his house and they knock on his door and they're like, is there anybody there? And they said, no, there's no answer. And so they have to figure out, without giving away the Psychic Danger Society and without giving away that they're meddling little old ladies in their town, they have to try and save this man who is going to go back into the water to save his cat, Midnight. So how are they going to do that? Are they going to rescue the cat first? Are they going to wake him up and drag him out of there? Are they going to kidnap him? Are they going to, et cetera, et cetera? To make sure that this isn't easily resolved by burning down the house, for instance. I'm just using that as the kind of pejorative solution.
No, yeah, got it. But players do that. That makes sense.
There is a danger clock in the game, and every time somebody resolves something in the direction of the case being resolved, it ticks in a favorable way. And every time they fail a roll and make things worse, it ticks backwards. And once it reaches the one extreme, it is solved. And once it reaches the other extreme, it is not solved. It is failed. So there is a kind of playing with fate aspect that you have to thread the needle of in order to satisfy the case and move forward. Yeah. And the point at which you fail a case, let's say that poor Darwish Betancourt drowns, even though you save the cat Midnight and is now rescued in Jolene's van and being dried off. So at least you've got the cat. But because the case has failed, well, that's when a supernatural case occurs. That's when now there are werewolves running the Star Castle diner, and they will eat people who come in to order a hamburger, or something equally. So there's reams and reams of these lists according to here are the cases of the spring and the summer and the autumn and the winter. Shamelessly leans on my small Ontario upbringing. So in the winter is covered with snow and ice, and there's a lot of people slipping on the ice and whatever else.
Yeah. I feel you've almost answered the question already, but just to get the question, we have a question to clarify what the goal of the game kind of is. And I guess the goal is to kind of resolve these cases. So you'll see a situation and the game is how do we resolve this? Is that
how do we save our small town? How do we save our town from trouble? You know, we don't want Darwish Betancourt to die and being drowned, and we want to be able to save the cat Midnight. And these are people that you live with and that you love in your community, even if they annoy you, or even if you've had a feud for the last 20 years or whatever. And you want to protect your small town of Beaumont Camp. I don't think I've mentioned that before now, but I named it Beaumont Camp. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the goal of the game is to protect your community, and the way we do that is mechanically through these cases that appear, and hopefully resolve them. And if not, something supernatural happens.
Is through meddling. The way we do
Yeah.
that is through meddling. Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of it comes down to scolding people or or convincing them or getting them to go the other way or whatever else.
Fantastic. That's great. So in terms of the structure of a session, how would that work? So if I was sitting down, I'm interested in running the game, how should I plan for this session that I'm running?
Well, I just show up with the book, and that's
Mhm.
part of why I've made games that involve a lot of a whole night planning beforehand.
Mhm.
But these days, I think I'd rather make games that mean that I've already made them. So you have a list of cases, and
Mhm.
when people put forward that dice, there's already a list. I know that if they put forward a 5 in spring means this is what's going to happen right here.
Mhm.
So I can just continue with the book. Of course, once you've done this for half an hour, you know exactly what to do to make your own cases, and you can just scratch them all out. And you can maybe in the time that you would be planning most other games, you could scratch out 12 cases that
Mhm.
would see you through the next 5 or 6 nights of play. So it comes ready-made
Yeah.
for the most part, and without limiting your ability to be creative and come up with stories, because it's not it's very down to earth and it's very close to home. So
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to come up with things that have happened in your neighborhood or things that you've read in the news that you want to lean on.
Mhm. You mentioned as well, mechanically, the game has a system so that people aren't stuck. Like, because the fear I have sometimes for running mystery games as a GM is that what if they don't pick up my leads and they don't know what to do? And you've already mentioned you have a system for that. Is there any other advice or mechanics that you have for GMs to maybe if they're new to running games and are interested in running this, do you have any advice for them on running the Psychic Danger Society to alleviate any other fears maybe?
Well, it, it is a tried and true analogy that I draw from of third day of a convention and you're too tired and you don't want to do this anymore.
Sure.
Because because I don't when you're on, right? When
Mhm.
everybody the energy is high and you're super excited to be there, you could run a paper bag, right?
Mhm.
You didn't need anything more than that out of a
Sure.
system. You don't even need the paper bag.
Mhm.
But we often, as gamers, want to game, and sometimes it's just not going to work. Like your brain is not going to function the way you want it to, or the
Mhm.
creativity is not going to come to you. So it is designed as a system that you can lean on. Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
only 48 pages plus 4, so 52 pages. Um, and in it is a lot, crammed a lot of stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
the mechanics aren't particularly onerous. You now know all of the mechanics,
Mhm.
and it's just a case of these funny little cases, and you can lean on the case on the book for those funny little cases. So
Mhm.
no prep is needed, and hours of small town community mystery murder and tea await you.
Fantastic. I love that. Well, if somebody has been listening and they're interested in running, how can they get involved with it? 'Cause you ran the campaign fairly recently on Kickstarter and it's successfully funded, and you're in the process of getting it printed. But how can other people get involved?
The Kickstarter recently closed,
Hmm.
and I thank all of my Kickstarter backers.
Hmm.
And it is on the cusp, the very cusp of being fulfilled. So the PDF is going to come out in a matter of days. Could be
Hmm.
tomorrow, could be Friday. I'm just waiting on one backer to give me their name so I can put that name in the book. That's all that's happening. It's been sensitivity read and edited and top edited and content edited and proofed and gone over with a fine tooth comb. I'm sure there's still a spelling mistake in there somewhere, but anyway, it's as done can be. So it will be coming out imminently, and
Hmm.
it will be available once I order the print proof and get the print proofs back. It will be available from Drive-Through RPG, through Indie Press Revolution,
Hmm.
through itch.io, and through Compose Dream Games, which is a Canadian distributor and website that
Hmm.
also has a UK store. So
Oh,
they have
fab.
a UK store now. So if you have any concerns about shipping or printing costs, Compose Dream Games is something I'd heartily recommend as another avenue for getting the book. And that will happen as soon as DriveThruRPG sends me back my print proofs and it comes out.
Fantastic. And I guess Radio James Games is the best place for people to have a look and get information on that, for links for all those bits and pieces. Is that right?
I have a lovely little newsletter that I probably put too much thought into. That is, you can sign up for at the bottom of Radio James Games. It is a, it isn't. I mean, I don't know. I'm not very good at interneting. I put all my energy into the games themselves. But if anyone wants to know more about me or about my games or about the Psychic Danger Society specifically, there's at least a little bit about it on the website radiojamesgames.com, and there is a sign up for the newsletter at the bottom. I don't always send a newsletter, but when but if I have something to say, then once a month that I do, you can get a newsletter, and the next one is going to include things like, hey, the Psychic Danger Society is out now and you can get it here. And if you want to be a part of that, radiojamesgames.com is the place for you.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I'll have a look there. So if anyone was interested, do take a look there. And there's lots of other games that James does as well that are out and available now. Because the best way to support indie tabletop creators is to buy their stuff if you can. But yeah, James, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about the Psychic Danger Society. It's been so lovely to hear more about it from you. I do have one more question before you go, and that is if you have any other games that you'd like to give a shout out to.
So, Jessica, thank you for asking that. I have many games. Not only mention one, but I have many games because I'm also the current membership coordinator for the Indie Game Developer Network, which is an international non-for-profit trade organization representing indie tabletop role-playing game publishers. So, and I encourage everyone to go check us out at igdnonline.com and learn all about that organization. I will point to I think I can call him a friend. He's at least an acquaintance, and I would like to call him a friend, called Kurt Rifling, who did a wonderful game called Sock Puppets that was only released about a month ago. And you may be familiar with his last game before then, which was called Here We Used to Fly, which was a story game about revisiting a theme park from your youth. And I thought it was just beautiful because you had this kind of dual narrative of here you are as an adult character, and here you are as a child character exploring the same spaces. And it stirred a lot in me because it made me think about the nature of conflict. And conflict doesn't have to come from a big bad boogeyman or a cave troll or something. Conflict can sometimes come from within you and within the kind of dissonance that comes from your childhood self and your adulthood self. Anyway, he followed that up with a game about sock puppets, which also has a kind of dissonance because you're playing not only the puppet character that you have to make, and you have to actually make a puppet or get a paper bag or a sock, but you're also playing the person who is puppeteering. And the framing is that it's the last episode of a failed cable TV show. Right. So everything's off the rails. And you have a relationship with the other puppeteers around the table. So maybe you're playing a puppeteer and you have a puppet, and I'm playing a puppeteer with a puppet, and we're getting divorced, and we're hashing it all out on this television between commercial breaks while we're trying to talk about sharing. Sorry, my hand keeps moving because it's a puppet, right?
Yeah, I got it.
So it has I have never hurt so hard from laughing trying to play a game. And it is wonderful in the way that you're having to balance the nature of I'm both Monster Groucho, the puppet who loves to be grouchy, and my puppeteer has just joined a cult and would like everyone to hear about the cult and spread the message of the cult. So it's a joy. Because again, it plays with the idea that conflict doesn't have to come from a big bad. Conflict can sometimes be a little bit closer to home, but in an amusing way, in a way that doesn't have to be, as self-sincere as walking through a theme park with childhood nostalgia, which is also a wonderful kind of experience to have, especially with a group of friends or strangers or strangers. But this is Sock Puppets, and it's a lot of fun. So that is my recommendation. Kurt Rifling.
I like that. I like that recommendation a lot. That sounds very interested. You've kind of sold me. My interest is definitely piqued. But yeah, James, again, thank you so much for coming on. It was so lovely to hear from you. As I said, you have other games, so we may have to have you back on to talk about some other things in the future as well.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much, Jessica.
No problem. And thank you to everyone that has watched and listened. Links to everything we talked about are in the show notes of the podcast or in the comments if you're watching the live stream. That is all for this week. Next week, I will let you know all the little games we're looking at in May. So I will see you next week. But for now, thank you very much and goodbye.